Hi, hello, and welcome to According to Weeze, the podcast, where we're going to have candid conversation with the hopes of finding a way forward in community. See, we exist and experience life at the intersection of our complex identities and our socio-cultural and political systems. And let's be real, the only way to dismantle it all is to start by dissecting it. So get cozy, get comfy, and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to another episode of According to Weeze, the podcast. Today, I feel like I say this with every guest because I am really lucky that really amazing people agree to come talk to me, whether like I'm already in community with them or, I'm growing into community with them. But so I'm going to say this, and I say it every episode. I'm super excited to have today's guest here. Really amazing, phenomenal human, doing really great work in the world, obviously. That's why they're here. Vava, thank you so much. We're going to start with thank you. Because we know you don't like your time wasted. And I'm very appreciative of your time.
Thank you for having me, Weeze.
Yeah, of course. So here at According to Weeze, we'll do the cute, very fancy professional bio in the show notes. But I like to let the guests just tell the people about themselves and, give them their own little bio. What do you want the people to know about you right now in the context of this conversation? What feels important to know?
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
I ain't a killer, but don't push me.
Okay. A passionate, creative, industrious, hungry female, born and raised in Africa, in Kenya, but with a lot of influences in my life, a lot of Western influence, partly due to colonialism and my exposure and having lived and traveled around the world and gone to school in the Western world. So I say I'm a citizen of the world just because I've lived pretty much everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I love coffee, and not just in the way that people say I love coffee. No, I eat, breathe, work in the coffee industry, and I influence what coffee's international buyers buy because of my palate. So I do that for a living. I work with coffee producers in Africa, in particular Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. And my company exports coffee to different parts of the world. So spend a lot of time on coffee farms. I love nature. I love trees. I love farm life. But and I'm really and on any typical day I could be tasting about 100 coffees just to pick what to send to clients. So that's part of the work.
What?
Yes.
That is the dream.
Yes. It's taxing. It's everything.
I'm in the wrong industry.
And for me, coffees tell such a deep story. I envision in my mind, with the current book, of course, we did my first attempt and play on how maps can tell a story just in a different way. I'm passionate about numbers and data. So that's my number one. I'm professionally trained mathematician, statistician. So that's my background.
I was going to say, wait, you can't skip over that because you got a whole ass degree. When I read that, I was like, I had to do stats for sociology because I'm a sociologist at my core. Yeah. And I thought I was good at math until I had to do that. And then I was like, she did what? Oh, damn.
Yeah, so
okay.
Actuarial science and statistics, that's my background. And I used to be a geek. Okay, I'm still a geek about many things, but numbers have always been, I'm fascinated by numbers, even if I think when you become an entrepreneur, like your life is, and you're running your own business, it's like you're fighting for your life every day. So you kind of, if you don't remind yourself on a daily basis who you are and what you're passionate about and what you're really good at, it kind of flakes away because of all the drama of running a business. So I try and still remain fresh with stats, with mapping, with just storytelling using data is what I love. And I wish I could get a shitload of money to just storytell using data. That's just my dream. Like I said earlier, it's just, if I could storytell and map out, create a library of what Kenyan coffee looks like using data points and using, data points that, that can also transform the lives of these producers over time. That's my dream. And what else should people know about me? Yeah, other than those things, I'm a diverse person, like, and I love children. Like, I like children because they're innocent. They've not been corrupted by the world, and they're innocent, and they tell you what they feel and think.
Yes.
And, they're blunt. And I think that's why I get along with kids.
Yeah.
Adults, we lie a lot. Like, people will sugarcoat things to make you not hurt your feelings, or like, so I get along with kids, dogs. I love animals. I love animals, by the way, because they also show you their true affections, unlike human beings. That said, of course, I'm a mother, so of course I love humans, little ones, and even the. And I think humanity has so much potential, but we need to be more honest with ourselves about what we really want in this life. And I love fashion. I love color. I would say I'm African, so that kind of goes with the territory. But not everyone can dress really well and look cool. So I have a knack for things, fashion, things, food. I love to cook. So I'm a woman of depth, is what I'm trying to say.
TLDR. No, listen, this is the beautiful thing about According to Weeze, the podcast. I always tell people the show's named after me, but it's your show. So you can spend as long or as little on anything as you want to. You could even start talking and be like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. Let's talk about something else. All right. Like, that's fine. No, I love that. That gives people, the reason I asked that question is exactly that, right? Like, we have these bios that we give out to the world. I know that I feel very constrained whenever a podcast or an interview or whatever is like, can we have your bio? And I'm like, you want me to put all of the depth and breadth and complexities and nuances of all of the things that I love in 2 paragraphs? Like, you just ask me what you really want to know. Where did I go to school? When did I graduate? What degrees do I hold? How can you make me sound fancy? And what makes me credible? Just ask me that, because that's all you want to know. You don't want my bio.
Yeah.
So this is why I give people the opportunity to really just tell us who they are from themselves. Like, what's on your spirit in this moment? Share it with us.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So there's so many things I want to talk to you about. Let's start with coffee, because the listeners know I say that coffee is my first true love, and I really mean it. I know you get this, but the smell of different roasts elicit different feelings. And then if you've had a long love affair with coffee, then different memories and different people. And, and then the thing that happens when 2 people share a good cup of coffee together and can talk about it. I will not date people who don't at least have a minimal appreciation for coffee. I'm not kidding.
I agree. Do not.
Right? I think it says something about you. If a dude is I'll drink coffee, I guess, whatever, is, at the gas station. I'm like, ew, no, cannot.
Ew,
but
gas station coffee, never.
Not dating people because of their, what'd you say? Gas station coffee? No, right? No.
Yeah.
But anyways, so that being said, I think what you're doing with coffee is really amazing, because what people don't know, unless they saw my post about it some time ago, is that the coffee bean originated in Africa. There's actually a coffee company out here called Red Bay Coffee.
I know them, yeah.
And they make a shirt that says "Coffee, Africa's gift to the world." And I want them to put "You're welcome" on the bag. I'm working on it. but like many other of our natural resources on the continent, it's been taken and it's been exploited. And those that are most closely connected to, right, the bean, so the farmers and so on and so forth, are just being exploited and then pressed in a way, right, to produce as much as possible, but don't nearly see any of the financial, monetary, the monetary benefits, so on and so forth, that the industry is seeing.
Yeah.
And obviously, you're the professional. So I would love it if you could just speak to that a little bit, and how your work kind of is entrenched in that reality.
So people should know, and this is, when I have worked with people that drink coffee, and I take them to the farm to just see the process of what coffee goes through before it gets to your cup. They have mad respect, and mad respect doesn't even like fully contextualize how an everyday coffee drinker looks at coffee totally differently once they've been on a farm and seen what producers go through and how producers are living. And yet we're out there drinking coffee at Pete's Coffee in the US or somewhere, some fancy coffee shop where they've spent a lot more money on a coffee machine than what they pay producers. Mm-hmm. And for me, it stopped being ironic. It became it's like a social justice sort of issue for me, because I'm like,
100%.
I got tired of attending expensive conferences and always sitting in a room where we're talking about sustainability and income for producers and blah, 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 blah. And nobody really taking hard steps towards ensuring that a producer is getting paid what their coffee is worth, and for people to stop referring to the commodity market when they're sort of benchmarking what a producer should be paid. So coffee goes through several processes that require hard labor, that use hands, not even machinery. Brazil is the only one country where they harvest coffee with machines, but even that doesn't bring out the finesse or like that comes out of coffees from other parts of the world, where people are laboring, picking the ripe cherries only, because that's another thing. Picking green cherry is a no-no. You got to pick a ripe red cherry for you to have a consistent coffee to process. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of defects. And I like to do, actually, because the CMB book is out, we're doing like a launch, a mini launch here in Kenya, very few people. And part of that afternoon is just to showcase to people that like coffee. You know, it's sad that in producing countries in Africa, we don't even drink this coffee. Kenyan consumption right now is at 6%, which is like a woohoo, yay, 6%. Yeah. We were at 3% for the longest time. So we rely on the Western world to drink these beans, yet it is, coffee is the second most traded commodity after oil. But it was set up in the structures of it are very colonial, and it's about slavery. Let's enslave the producers. They'll keep producing. They don't even know anything about what they're producing. Let's run the markets. Let's dictate the pricing. Let's dictate the terms and conditions of quality levels. So producers are told. They've never been part of the conversation until we've demanded that we should be part of the conversation and we should have a seat at the table. And unfortunately, there's very few voices, say like mine, in the industry from producing countries. We are there, but you see, when you've been enslaved for so long and you don't know any better, and you're like, hey, listen, I just want to sell my harvest and get whatever money. I have like 20 hectares or 100 and something hectares. I just want to be done with it and just go on. We can keep having those meetings where we're talking about fair wages or I don't know, have people pay better prices. But, it's also like, it's become a mindset that even some producers are comfortable with. They just like use the coffee cherries as collateral to get a loan. And then you're in a cyclical pattern of debt. Mm-hmm. So I got into this industry purely for this, because having been exposed to Starbucks, Tim Hortons, all of those fancy places at Barnes and Nobles when I was a student, and I questioned when I saw like a bag of Kenyan coffee retailing at like $20, and I asked myself, okay, I always hear my grandma like complaining about how she's getting nothing for her coffee. And I'm at a Starbucks store in a library on campus, sipping on a coffee in a very fancy place, and producers are struggling. Like, this is like, I looked at the socioeconomic situation there. I was like, this is not making sense. Of course, being a daughter of an economist, I kind of like could tell that there's like sometimes demand, supply, and whoever is demanding, but also Africa's leaders have never quite done justice to really like fight for, proper maybe trade deals or stuff like that, like even for its own people. So I was like, what can private enterprise do? Why hasn't private enterprise done anything to speak for producers, or to put the faces of these producers on this in terms of marketing and truly tell the story. But then even when you say that, you look at how producer images are used, and it's for exploitation purposes. It's not that anything is going back to a producer's pocket. So, and I have this thing whereby I do good things when I'm angry. When I'm angry, that just propels me to like try and do some shit that is gonna like change something, because I'm like, this is bullshit. So all of these observations propelled me to dive into this industry, and I'm glad I didn't know anything about this industry, because had I known, I would not have gone into this industry, because it's a rough one.
Yeah.
So the less you know sometimes in life, the better, especially if your heart is in the right place, you get further. And if you're not being propelled by money, you get further. But at some point, the reality is we all got to pay bills. So, and even when you're fundraising and talking to investors, it's all like, oh, show us the numbers. Da, da, da. So to the point of your question, this is a very exploitative industry. I wish consumers knew, I wish many more consumers knew what really happens in producing countries in terms of labor, the processes, the farm inputs that producers have to put, what picking season looks like, and now during COVID when there were restrictions, what that looked like. Transportation from like rocky hills where there's like no roads in some of these places. So when I am cupping a coffee at the end of the day, Weeze, let me tell you, I'm imagining these places because I visit these places, and I'm like already like in a romantic sort of setting in my mind with a coffee, just like, especially when a coffee blows your mind, you're like, wow, this, it's like you're in a relationship with the being. It's like, it's like, and for me, this is why, like, what I do, like, this is why I've never stopped what I'm doing, because the relationship we have with the producers and how persistent a farmer is, and the things that we've taught producers. Like, I can tell you, this is one of my most special years when we've managed to produce a really beautiful Kenyan natural. There's Ethiopia is more known for natural coffees. Natural coffees are coffees that are sun-dried, in the just dried out in the sun. And because of the process, it produces such a sweet coffee, like a coffee with such complexity. Of course, a coffee is like wine, in that someone may like a wine from Bordeaux and someone may like a wine grown in another part of France because of how the soil and everything influence the final taste. But I can tell you, Kenya is really not known for producing natural coffees. And by the time I was convincing some of our producers to experiment with me, and I was like, guys, just watch. Like, I'll pay in advance for this experiment. Because what farmers are also wary of is people that come and dictate all kinds of things, and they leave, and the farmer is stuck with whatever experiment you wanted, and they can't sell it. But I've just proven something. I've just like, this is doable. We can sell it for a much higher price than your washed coffees. And for me, I'm also looking at, don't ever introduce things to producers that don't make financial sense to them, or that are not trickling. Nothing's trickling down to a producer's pocket based on what we like to dictate to them as what we like. So unfortunately, the industry is set up the way it is, and I'm like, to break those shackles is tough, but we can try, we can start, but it's a tough journey.
My brain, I'm like, there are so many thoughts in my head right now. I feel like I just want to listen to you talk and tell stories about producers and beans and Africa all day long. Like, that's all I really want to do. But I really want to come back to, because this to me is like one of the things that, and not surprising, I should say, right? One of the things that is really overlooked, but is the most critical part of not only the work you're doing, but the social justice, right, issue, is that we're looking at an industry that is completely rooted in the colonization and enslavement of peoples.
Yeah.
And it's not white peoples, it's people who have already historically been colonized and enslaved. Right? And so I want to really circle back to this because a lot of times I think people who aren't familiar either with the history of the continent, the history of global colonization, imperialism, don't understand its functionality just because they have never had to look at it or they don't have a proximity to it. It's not in their ancestry, whatever. They hear it and they're like, oh, yeah. Like that was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like, first, let's be clear. Africa was still colonized well until like yesterday. Like my parents were born into colonial Africa, right? Like my parents can tell you stories and my parents are not special. They just, that's the history of the continent. But I say that because a lot of times people are like, again, oh, it was so long ago. And it's like, no, like literally the last generation. So no, it wasn't that long ago, one. Two, we're not just talking about the ways in which land is colonized, right? A lot of people, I think they hear colonization, they're like, oh, well, the colonizer is not physically there in that way. Okay, but they have left their history of colonization, their systems, right, which are systems of whiteness. So for Americans listening, they're the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, where do you think the Europeans who initially came to America got the ideas? And so this is something that I would really love to talk about is how we're seeing the ramifications and the it's a long history, but it's still a very much current events impact of colonization through the lens of coffee. If you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Like you said, I mean, colonialism is still rife with us. Like I look at an industry where even how we trade coffee in Kenya is still by rules set in 1958 by our colonial masters, the people that own large tracts of land where coffee is produced, like the large estates or the large plantations. It's the white companies. The trade that runs at the auction every Tuesday in Kenya, it's like predominantly it's multinationals. It's run by our colonial sort of masters, and I'm like, even the way the auction room is set up is still the way it was in 1958. Old school screen up there, like buzzer buttons. Nothing has changed, including the chairs. Like nothing. Even when you walk in, it's like they've been told this shit cannot be changed. The maps, everything are from colonial era. We've done nothing to update it to speak to who we are as Kenyans and Africans. So, and there's the mentality that a young black woman, what does she know about coffee? White people know more about coffee than we do. And I'm like, well, thank my parents who exposed me to all of this Westernness that, because you got to kind of study your enemy and know what they're about, that so that you can also like help transform things is what I believe. You got to know who these people are and how they do things. And it's a passion that I fell into. I would say I didn't plan to, I fell into it and I was like, okay, so now let's just find out what this is about. And then I was so disappointed because when I was trying to write my thesis for my master's, it was pegged on the coffee industry, but also how to create an alternative trading platform for coffee producers that was looking at more the cost of production rather than just some C market thing, but just looking at the cost of production and how we can set an alternative trading place for coffee producers that is more, what can I say, that speaks to ethical sourcing and just more competitive rather than the subjectiveness sometimes that we have, and also just make it more modern. But here we are, I mean, where we truly believe that what the white man said for us is what goes, and we've been trading like that since. They taught us how to cup the coffee. They taught us how to process the coffee. I'm not complaining about that because Kenya is actually predominantly one of the countries that does really good washed coffees because of what the British introduced. So we've stuck to that. But when you try and sort of improve it or even ask the government to look at policy changes that don't make sense, like for example, as a Kenyan run company, I can't buy coffee directly from producers. So what did I do?
Wait, what?
Yes. I had to, yes.
Make it make sense.
It doesn't make sense. But for me to say that I'm trading directly with coffee producers, it's illegal for me as a locally registered company to go directly to a farmer and sign a contract and say, I'm doing direct trade. So what I did to jump all the hoops is just register companies in the UK and in the US. So those, when I'm doing any type of direct trade, I use my enterprises out there to do the direct purchases. Yet I got into this industry to promote direct trade. Like I was like, yeah, I'm gonna just buy coffee directly. Let's succumb this. I'm gonna do all my stuff direct. Then I realized, wait a minute, I'm screwed because I don't have a registered entity outside of Kenya. So I was like, okay, now let's start looking at how we can go about this. Thank God for having lived in the US, Canada, and parts of Europe. So I was like, okay, God joined up with friends so at least I have that. Yeah. But to date, that rule has not changed. So you tell me how beneficial that is to any young person who really wants to get into the coffee industry for real change, or to even if they own a family coffee farm, how, I understand why the auction system exists. It's also to like ensure that there's a fair chance for producers who are in co-ops and whatever. I understand why it exists. However, I think the government should really relook some of these policies that do not make sense, especially if you're a Kenyan who's just trying to do the right thing and promote local trade or promote producers who actually have the ability to sell you their coffee. So the only people that say buy coffee directly mostly are white folks who come in and they're like, yeah, I want direct, whatever.
Well, so that's what I was going to ask, because to me, it sounds like the policy has been set up to ensure that Kenyans in Kenya have to, once again, like you said, look to white folks to be their
saviors,
way in to their own country.
Yeah.
Right? So once again, you have whiteness being the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Like, and to be clear, this is a policy that was handed down, it was written originally during colonial rule. And it was handed down and has just never been changed. Like, this isn't like Kenyan government was like, this makes sense, right? So like when we're talking about the long-term impacts of colonization, we're not just talking about, the mentality or people trying to really rebuild or grow or stabilize post, colonization. Because if you know anything about the decolonization of African countries, it wasn't like the colonizer was like, let me make sure you're okay. Like that was not the case, right?
Yeah.
So we're really talking about the ways in which colonial stronghold exists down to like policy and infrastructure.
Yeah. And I can tell you,
it is mind-blowing to think that.
Let me tell you how much money that has been spent in Kenya when farmers realized, one, they need like, I don't know how many licenses to try and sell direct, because also they put chains on us. They also put chains on the farmers. And the hoops that I've worked with a lot of farmer groups, and by the time any farmer group gets a license to sell, to do direct trade, because the chains are not just, the limitations are not just on us. Like, as a producer, you just can't wake up and be like, hey, I like Vava, I just want to sell direct, like as a co-op. No.
Yeah.
Especially cooperatives, they can't. You have to get a specific license for that. So you ask me why there's so many regulations around a crop which you grow in your own farm, which is so like, what do you call it? It's like, it's been so regulated. Why? Only recently have we seen some progress. I'm not saying we've not seen progress, but how much has it taken? First of all, we've got people who work in government who don't understand what coffee is and who don't understand how far back all of these policies go and what needs to be done to really move more efficiently as a country in terms of working with farmers. I'm like, that saying when they say agriculture is the backbone of this economy, agriculture is the backbone of Africa. I mean, and a lot of this foreigners see, it's like white people apparently have like a future of Africa, which they see and they just come invest aggressively. And I'm like, as Africans, when we see that vision, nobody wants to support us. Because I'm like, I want to, like, what did COVID teach us? If you're a farmer, you're a fucking billionaire during COVID times, because people were struggling for food. People needed food. People need like healthy food. And I mean, I've always said that food production is the way to go. But we need to invest in our own enterprises and even young people who are innovative to drive these sectors. But what do? We always rely on the larger scale folks, be it the Indian who's in Kenya, like abusing Kenyans who work for them, be it the white person who owns tracts of land who abuses people on flower farms. Those are the people that we bank on all the time. Mm-hmm. But as a young person, if you have a dream, I can tell you, now we're talking about coffee. One day, let's have a discussion about the flower industry, since we had a chit chat about flowers. If you learn where your flowers are grown and like the kind of like crap that happens on flower farms, it's gory. Like, and even I tried diversifying during COVID and getting into the flower industry because I love flowers. And I was like, let's use part of the farm let's diversify, let's get into flowers. And whoever buys our coffee can also think about buying flowers.
Yeah.
Shock on me about how many rules and regulations there are in the flower industry. I was just like, fuck this, I'm going back to coffee, man. Like,
yeah, it's very predatory. Yeah, there was a whole scandal here in the United States, locally San Francisco, around Farmhouse Flowers is a company out here that claimed to, be sustainably sourced and blah, 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 and fair trade, and of course it comes out absolutely not. They are and they were charging prices as though they were. So, people like myself who are like, care about coffee producers the same way we care about flower farmers are like, yeah, of course I'll spend way more money if I'm being told and there's a guarantee that it's going to, and then you find, no, got your ass, right? Like they took advantage of the fact that people know that farmers are being exploited. And there is a route like, oh, look, people are trying to do this in the right way. It was just a whole mess. So, yes, flowers are, yes. But there is one thing I want to say, because you briefly mentioned it. And this is just something, it's just my own little, I have an issue with it, because there's this narrative that it's like just white folks that have colonized Africa or are still the problem. But I want to be very clear that China, India, and European countries, currently India and China are taking over both Africa as well as the Caribbean.
Yeah.
So y'all need to start reading some books, because when we talk about global anti-Blackness, that's also what we're talking about. Okay, just had to say that, because if I hear one more person act like that's not a real thing, I'm going to lose my fucking mind. Okay, sorry. Back to you, Vava.
No, on that part, it's
on that note.
On that note, I mean, I'm just going back to the previous question. Is I think as Africans, I fault us for perpetuating and not listening to our own people when we're out there trying to fight for the right thing. I'll give you an example. Wangari Maathai, Nobel laureate, she started fighting for the environment years and years ago. Got so many awards outside of Kenya, so many years before Kenya even recognized or appreciated her. There were buses in Japan painted Wangari Maathai. People loved her. But in Kenya, we did not appreciate her. We just thought she was a crazy woman who loved trees. She got beat up by police several times, got put in prison, got called crazy by her ex-husband. Like, and people called her crazy because she, I don't know, divorced, whatever. And I'm like, I look at how she was treated, and eventually when she won the Nobel Peace Prize, how as Kenyans all of a sudden she was our hero. And I'm like, screw that, man. Like, can we just open our eyes and look at the people? Who's your neighbor and what are they doing, to improve the world around you? And who's your friend and can you support their business? And I talk to government and I'm like, the government should do a better job of supporting local enterprise and not just paying us lip service. Why does a white Danish run company have a huge EPZ space where they don't pay taxes at all for producing coffee in Kenya? Yes, they're providing employment, whatever, but I'm like, why don't you offer such spaces to young entrepreneurs who've shown potential and give them grants to start these things? And maybe I don't mind mentorship because I'm like, we all need each other. Like, let that Danish guy come and mentor me, but let that be the precondition for them to not pay taxes in Kenya, because the Danish are not
Right.
going to let a Kenyan go scot-free setting up a company in Denmark. But why do we just have these things happen in Africa where we think white people are the answer to our problems, or that foreigners are the key to us unlocking our potential? I don't know.
Yeah.
And
That, and I mean, you know, this idea that like now you're worthy because you've been given a Nobel Peace Prize. Again, it's like the, you know, it's the white badge of honor. It's like, okay, now you're credible because
yeah,
whiteness has deemed you
credible.
brilliant or acceptable or genius, right? Now we don't weaponize all of the narratives around being a woman and being a divorced woman and being countercultural because you care about the environment and
Yeah.
right, like all of
So-
those things. And I think what you bring up is so important, and I actually want to make this point and then even pivot us, because you talked about like basically the next generation, which I mean, I think if we can do anything for the next generation, it's set them up, one, to win in ways like that, right? Like we didn't have, but two, to your point around mentorship, like provide them that guidance. But when we talk about the one thing that I view as like an obstacle to that is the fact that like I talk about us being colonized by like white supremacist ideology, like whiteness, right? Not just like our lands, but like our bodies, our mentalities, our minds, our spirits, because we have been convinced so deeply that if we can replicate whiteness, or if we can increase our proximity to whiteness, the more we act like it, the more we chase it, the more we literally are like in bed with it, then, oh, we can be successful. Like we've been taught to turn on ourselves, both individually and collectively. We've been taught to whitewash all of the things that we do and deny and renounce all of the ways in which, you know, we would authentically operate. Because like that's what success and winning looks like.
Yeah.
I personally say fuck that, right? And like don't subscribe to that. But I do think, to me, I feel like that's one of the obstacles that we have to overcome. And if we can start to talk to the next generation, like with that in mind, right? Like how different it could be for them. I know that's something that you're super passionate about also. How do you see that, especially in the coffee industry, but even like broader, like just in terms of entrepreneurship, right? Because we actually know right now, statistically, the largest growing number of entrepreneurs globally are Black folk, and specifically Black women.
Yeah.
But entrepreneurship is not built for people of color, and definitely not Black folk, and definitely not Black women. So it's like, how can we set the next generation up, or even ourselves, right, that are in it now, to succeed when we have this hurdle or this obstacle, you know, to face?
Yeah, I think one thing, as I mentioned earlier, that I really love is when a young person comes to me asking how I've done it or how they can do it and some advice. And one thing that I don't do is ever bullshit anyone. Like I say it like it is, but I think one thing that folks appreciate, or it's important for young people to see examples they can relate to, which is why I'm all about forget the fucking hype that you see on TV about, especially about African entrepreneurs and how they made it. Like I look at and I ask us, even as Africans, like, okay, guys, I'm not asking you to put your dirty laundry out in public and say maybe all that crap about how you didn't pay bills for a couple of weeks or whatever, like how tough it was. But it's more like, can we stop lying to young people about success and what success looks like? And that's why I like athletes, because athletes, you see an athlete dying, like just training. You look at LeBron, like, you know, practicing his jump shot, or you look at Kobe when Kobe passed, and I talk about Kobe just because of course his memorial was just a few days ago, like literally yesterday. And I look at Kobe and like how Kobe would have isolated himself and practice before a big game. I look at Serena Williams. I look at Eliud Kipchoge, and how he trains when he's going for a marathon, when he broke a world record when people told him it was not possible.
Impossible, yeah.
Yeah, and he broke and shattered that. I look at Kenyan runners and I'm like, you know, anything is possible. You can do that. And young people need to know that nothing comes for free. Like hard work is necessary. So forget this freaking hype about, oh, I'll just create an app, or I'll just like do it like this. I'll just chill in my room and I'll just like, no. Even Steve Jobs, who quit, I mean, people, there's the storytelling side of it where people forget about the real story of who that person is and the struggles that they go through. People fight their own personal demons to become what you see them as: great actors, actresses, great athletes. That's why I said that the greatest achievement in life is to know yourself. Then and only then will you be happy. So it's important for young people to start seeing examples of people that look like them. And for us, we owe it to these young people to be honest about what the journey looked like. You don't have to tell us the gory stories of, the crazy shit. Nobody needs to know like the inner details, but just when a young person asks for advice about like, hey, so what did you have to do to whatever? And this is why I like shows like Shark Tank, where some of them don't bullshit. Like, what's his name? The guy that owns the sports teams. What's his name?
Mark Cuban?
Yes, Mark Cuban. He's one of the...
Yeah.
One thing I like about Mark Cuban is just, he looks at people who come in with the like, thinking it's all gonna be all... It's like, you have to grind. Have you knocked on all the doors and da-da-da-da? And then it's like, especially if you're there trying to market a product, and it's like, I will not invest in you unless you've tarmacked, unless you've shown grit, unless you've like, done all of these things. But unfortunately, millennials and the internet has sort of screwed kids to think that things are easy. Yes, technology is great, but to be successful, it's hard work. It's also just knowing what difference what's your differentiating factor? What are you bringing on board, and why is it that you want to be this? Don't go into an industry, or don't try to be something because you think Vava looks good doing it, I can do it. No, that's not how life works. And unfortunately, this is Africa, and Africans, that's our mentality. It's like, I want to copy paste. Like, I want to be that person because Vava's making money. I just want to make money and I want to be like her. No. So it's we on the other side whose job, your job may not be to inspire young people, but by virtue of the opportunities we've been given in life, you'll find yourself inspiring someone or saving someone's life somehow by the stories you tell and how you present yourself. Even you know that. I'm not speaking for you, but I'm like, yeah, you know this. There's people that look up to you.
No, I'm nodding. Don't worry. Go ahead. Keep going.
There's people that look up to you. There's people whose days that you improve. So I'm like, even though on the days that I'm bit like hard bit and I'm going through a tough day, I always look at someone out there could be looking at me for inspiration. So let me just keep going. So I think storytelling plays a huge role in this, but also storytelling with a purpose, not just storytelling for storytelling's sake, like the glitz and the glam. And I'm like, if there were more positive stories told about entrepreneurship, it's not a culture. We don't have that culture in Africa. We don't.
Yeah.
We are raised in Africa to, especially if you're from a middle-class family, you're raised to be well-educated, to get like 5 degrees and to get married.
That you're only going to use like 1.5 of them,
exactly,
if that.
or none. But
because then you get married and you're just supposed to have babies,
exactly,
and then be barefoot and pregnant. I mean,
and then when you're having the babies, what is the time to work? Like juggling and going crazy. So I'm like, so we're raised to be that and to be continuously subservient, or like just when you're married, you don't have to struggle. That's what you told me. When you're married, you don't have to struggle.
You've made it.
You've made it. Or like your husband will support you. Okay, we hear all those stories, and I know that some people believe that stuff. But when you go against the grain and you're truly following your heart, and you've actually done your risk analysis, or you've calculated what are the risks of doing this and what do I really want to do, and you pursue your career, or you pursue that direction you want to take in life, it pays off. In the end, it pays off. Even if the payoffs come in bits, in the end, you're happier because you've stayed true to yourself. There's a lot of people who end up having regrets in life because they did what society expected, and those are the miserable people you don't want to have a drink with. Like, you do not want to be near those people, like, So, yeah, and I'm like, the entrepreneurial culture does not exist where I grew up. You were supposed to do the degrees and do all of that stuff that I've said, and then work for someone. So the moment you say, Mom, Dad, I want to do my own thing, people are like, no, 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 no. Like, what is that? Like, we do not spend all this tuition money for you to go become an entrepreneur. Like, that is, so people, I think the perceptions of what
I can hear my
entrepreneurship
dad.
is need to change, and for people to appreciate who entrepreneurs are. And especially I would say in the African setting, because I get my inspiration from a lot of entrepreneurs who are not in Africa. It's like, you have a dream, you want to pursue it, you want to fulfill it, and you want to do it the right way. Because I had to educate myself on a lot of things, like, and I'm still learning every day about this industry that is so colonial that every other day I'm learning a new rule that the white man set up for me. And I'm like, Lord, okay, now we have to get on board with this.
That's what we're doing today? Okay.
Precisely. For me to get my coffees, this is it. Okay. So every day is a learning experience, but I'm like, okay, let me do this. Let me not let my producers down. Let me not let my clients down. Let me get it done, but also let me stay true to who I am. So.
Yeah. I really want to synthesize something that you said. And I'm glad I knew you were going to say it because we had already talked, but I want to make sure this isn't lost on especially anyone at any age that's thinking about entrepreneurship or really just walking if they feel like their purpose is outside of what they're currently doing. And especially if they hold a marginalized identity or they're melanated. A lot of times we have, and this is why I asked the question the way that I did. A lot of times we have this narrative that's like, you're going to have to struggle and it's going to have to be the worst thing ever because you're already behind the bar and you can't make it. So you might as well just go work for someone else. Right. And I like to flip it. And you just did it so eloquently. So I'm just going to do the TLDR version is, shit's going to be hard because life can be hard. And yes, if you hold marginalized identities and if you are a person of color, a melanated person, it's going to be harder for you than folks who are not. But it's not impossible. And it's a choice. It is a choice to commit to yourself, to commit to your purpose and your dream and to the work that it takes to do whatever it is that you want to do, to follow that path and to be successful in it. Because we could all sit here and give you our laundry list of the time I didn't pay my bills and I almost got evicted and maybe I was homeless and maybe I ate ramen or didn't eat for a week or sleeping on a couch. Okay, because that's life and things happen and you grind and you grit it out.
Yeah.
But, and also, just because, there's a saying in the States that, white folks have one starting line and then melanated folks start further back depending like on how dark you are, right? So like, because colorism is real.
Yeah.
So there's this like visual that they show.
Yeah.
And while that is true, that doesn't mean that you can't get to the finish line. So you might not get there first, you might get there last, but if you stay committed to the race, you're going to get to the finish line. And I think that's so important because we don't ever hear that enough. And so I thank you for like synthesizing that. And two, I really, really, really want to drive that home. But I also want to touch on, you talked about purpose. So I also really want to touch on this idea of like purpose, right? Like what am I doing this for? Is this my purpose? What is driving me? Because I know that a lot of times, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Maybe I should go work for someone else. I have those moments, like in my full humanity, I'm like, it would be so much easier.
Yes.
But then I'm like, wait, there's something to learn here. This is my path. This is, I got it. I got it in me to do the work. And there is a driving force. So what is that for you? And like, what does that look like for you?
Well, I may be saying this so many times. I feel like sometimes I think I'm a sensei, but I'm not. Like when you talk about being centered and whatever, I'm like, I'm not one of those people yet. I'm still on the journey. But the thing is, I know what I am and I know what I like, what I don't like. And life has a way of knocking you on the head when you try to be something else. So Knowing that and knowing my
Wait, I need you to
purpose.
say that again because people need to hear that, to really hear that.
What part? Like the part about life knocking you on your head.
Life has a way of knocking you on the head when you try to be something else. That needs to be a t-shirt.
No, it's true. Life does have a way of reminding you, man, you're being stupid, and something happens, it hits you, and then, oh, that's not me. This is me. Like when we're trying to be fake, life has a way of just reminding you, be yourself.
Yep.
And those are some of the hardest, toughest lessons, because when life is reminding you these things, because there's those mamas in your life that are silent, silent, silent. Then the loud one that just sort of, you're derailed and you're back on the rails and you're like, okay, I am going to be my true self now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So purpose, especially if you're in this world where you're trying to create change or be the change or do good things with your business, knowing why you started doing it is so important. If you have to like stick up sticky notes all over just to remind you every day, do that, but also surround yourself with the things that remind you why you're doing what you're doing. And for me, that is one. It's why did I start this? I wanted to really create a big difference within the industry for producers, first and foremost. It's like the people that work the hardest to give me this beautiful coffee have to know first what they're producing, how it tastes, get them better prices. If Vava Coffee directly can buy the coffee, because unfortunately, of course, we don't have as much, what is it called? We're not as liquidated or as heavily funded as some of this multinationals. So it is what it is. But one day I hope we get to trading larger volumes. The little I can do to put a smile on a producer's face, I do, especially if it's a business transaction. And for me, that 10, 12 producers whose lots I buy, and I know them, and I'm like, I know a lot of producers, but I'm like, if I can put money in their pockets that makes sense, it brings me joy. I'm drinking guilt-free, beautiful coffee that is like transforming lives. It's like, and it's not just, ours are not just one-off transactions. It's like a relationship we've built over time with these guys. The number of farm visits I did, Weeze, before farmers trusted me. Let me tell you a story now based on purpose. It's a couple of producers I've called on the phone always think I'm a man. And they're like,
oh,
yeah, because also nobody expects some woman to be like, hey, I'm coming to see farms or whatever, because I have a deep voice. And so we do farm visits, and this one farmer says, I actually thought you were a gentleman, but now you're a woman, and a young woman at that. So how sure am I that you're able to even buy my coffee? This is colonialism in effect. Yeah. Because usually they're used to white people.
Yep.
Either young or old, but white skin, whatever. And I always joke with my white friends. He was like, let's go on a trip because I need you as my, like security to ensure I get this transaction with a producer. The moment they've seen me with white men, because I do host a lot of buyers, I'm treated differently. Like they trust me. They trust that we're going to buy all the coffee. They trust that I can buy like 10 containers. But if I show up on my own saying, guys, this is the potential volume of business we can do this year, they're like, unless, then they start asking funny questions like, who's Vava married to? Like, is her husband white? Or is she like, just those kind of things? No, seriously, this stuff happens even today. And even in renting properties in the neighborhood that I live in, there's that kind of discrimination. So I'm like, so when you encounter this, so when you encounter this crap, you have to remember why you got into it, because I was like, screw all the scrutiny. Actually, that sounds nice. Screw all the scrutiny. Weeze, I just scrutiny. But I'm like,
that's another shirt.
Screw all of that. Yeah. I was like, who are you people who just don't know how to do business? Like, and I know that people have taken advantage of farmers, but why is it's easier for a white person to con Black people and get off with it? Mm-hmm. And you're labeled a con even before they even try and work with you. Why? Yeah. a white person gets off the hook even like by molesting children and like doing shit in my country.
Yeah.
And the government, like, I'm just like, people look the other way. They're like, yeah. And they look the other way and life continues. So there's all of these things. So I'm like, for me, it's first and foremost, the foundation of my organization is producers. Without producers, who are my greatest asset, I am no one. So I spend a lot of time and effort creating those relationships, listening to them, listening to their needs. I have invested a lot of money just growing this, including setting up a training facility where we invite producers, where we train them on understanding coffee. Because unless you actually know your worth, you'll always be taken advantage of in life. Yeah. And this is what has happened with producers. Because a producer doesn't understand the mechanism or the technique with which we grade coffees or how we cap coffees. They can be told anything. They can be told, hey, your coffee scored a lowly 80 and I'm going to pay you $4 a kilo for it. They'll be like, oh, what should I do to improve? They're like, the next season. And that person will go off scot-free. But if a producer actually spends some time learning about the agronomy fundamentals that can help improve their coffee, the processing methods, and how to actually evaluate their own coffee, no one can take advantage of them. And that's why it's important for producers to like send their coffee samples to a bunch of different people just to get an opinion before they trust an outsider or someone who just wants to pay, a low price because they want to take advantage of a producer. So I'm passionate about education for not just producers, but also consumers, so that when consumers start demanding coffee that is sourced ethically and storytelling that is told appropriately, because I'm like, some of the images we see of producers should not really be there in today's coffee world, but we see colonially influenced images. We see white people just snapping photos of black people anyhow they wish, because for them, they romanticize poverty, they romanticize a poor Africa. So when you show them a rich Africa or like a Nigeria where people wear gold, or Congo people who spend like, because I'm like, people in Africa are not that poor, we're rich.
God forbid a metropolitan city with some beautiful architecture actually make its way to the media. Like, God forbid.
Yeah.
This has been such an amazing I feel like I need to bring you back for a part 2, because I just feel like there's a whole other layer of depth and conversation and all the things that we could talk about. But before we wrap up, we're going to put links to all of, how to support you and find the work that you do and the coffee and all of that in the show notes. But if you could specifically ask a few things, one thing, whatever you want, but how can people support you in the work that you do so that you can better support producers and the mission?
If we can help to decolonize empowerment. I don't know why I just opened that page in the book and I was like, well, people can support by, I think, listening better. I think just being more attentive about what's happening in the world and being a more attentive human. Not just when the world is in a crisis, but all the time. And this is why I hate what happened in the US this past year, is that people were pretending that racism and police brutality was a new thing. Like, some people were acting
it's new.
shocked,
it just started. Like, you didn't know?
And I was like, 2020. People, please. Even before any of those videos got there, we had seen so many cases.
Listen, I told somebody, this has been happening before America was America in the rest of the world.
Yes.
And it just went by a different name.
Exactly. And even SARS in Nigeria, all of this stuff has been happening. So I think human beings, yes, we all are at fault for sometimes being too busy living, our day-to-day mundane lives and not being attentive to what your neighbor needs or what is happening in the world. And some people who travel a lot, you even wonder why they travel, because they're not paying attention to the places they're going and what the people are about. And I say the people, the place, the culture. You've got no business working as an expert in Kenya on women rights issues or producer issues if you've not ingrained yourself in that place, the culture, the people. Like, that should be part of the process of like hiring people who work in NGOs to come work in places where they think they can dictate how empowerment looks like. Now I'm getting a little, what is it called, passionate about this, because I'm just like, there's so many.
Oh no, they know. They hear me talk about this all the time. Y'all need to stop randomly going into places. You need to hire the people that are closest to the pain that you're trying to solve.
Exactly.
Listen to them. They hear me talk about this all the time. So that's why I'm just sitting here smiling, because I'm like, yeah, someone else is now saying it.
I'm so pissed at like how an influx of experts totally distorts a real estate market, totally distorts tuition fees we pay as Kenyans, totally distorts my life, and totally distorts maybe how many consultancy gigs I have access to.
Also though, Vava, like, how can somebody be an expert more than you on the place that you're from?
I don't know.
That you live in, that you're a community member of. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
How, Sway? How? I mean, I know how, because I understand how whiteness works. That's rhetorical. But yeah, to that point, right? So I love that. Listen, I'm gonna also plug. I'm gonna say this now.
Mm-hmm.
Vava has one of the most beautiful books. She just showed it to me that I have ever seen. And I don't have a coffee table yet because I just moved and it hasn't arrived. But I am going to buy one. It's going to sit right next to my Muhammad Ali book.
Ooh.
So it's going to go Muhammad Ali and Vava. And I'm not kidding. It is a beautiful book. It is an absolutely beautiful book. So listen, support, listen to those closest to the pain. And then specifically, really go check out what Vava is doing. Go check out and understand how she is really decolonizing the coffee industry in her own corner in the ways that she can. Buy the book, really make sure that you are understanding where your coffee comes from. People used to tell me that before it was cool, they were like, you're spending how much on a bag of coffee? And I'm like, well, yeah, because I'm making sure that it is ethical, that it is traded properly, that it is not exploitative. Like, if that means that I have to spend $40 on a bag of coffee so that I ensure that it goes to the right places in the right pockets, then that's what I'm going to do. But now it's cool. So you guys can be cool. Go do it. It's cool. Just like avocados. But go do that. Learn, listen, support, buy the book. Do better. And so something that I do, Vava, that I'll share with everyone, every time I get a cup of coffee, whether I make it at home or I go to one of my melanated owned coffee shops, locally owned coffee shops, I actually, like, very quietly to myself, I just thank the hands that produce the beans. I literally, every time, I just say thank you. And I put it out there to the universe. Because I don't know the producers, right? I don't know the hands, but I know that there are hands. You know what I mean? I know that it literally took blood, sweat, tears. I know that there's exploitation. And I believe in energy. And so if I can put that out there in the world's energy and, it gets to them in some sort of way. So if that's a practice that y'all want to take on, I suggest you do it. You should do it for flowers too. But yeah, let's also just start being more mindful when we consume. We're not just consuming a product, right? We are consuming, like I said, blood, sweat, tears. So being really mindful is important too. So that's my PSA to add on to all the amazing, beautiful things that you have said. Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your time and your knowledge and yourself. I'm truly honored and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Weeze, and thanks for having me and thinking about me, like, and bringing me on board. And I really appreciate it. Hands, you mentioned something that is super important in the coffee world. And I know I have been quoted a few times because I was irritated by the image of hands that we always see in coffee and not like who the producers are. So in my book, and this is not like a plug-in, there's this image of hands which basically depicts the chains, colonialism. I mean, just the hard work that goes in coffee, the slavery and all of that stuff. Like,
and I want, because people, if they don't buy the book, which they should, because what the picture that we see is like beautiful hands putting their hands into the coffee bean, which, mind you, means it's already gone through a process, to be clear, if you don't understand how coffee is made.
Yeah.
But the picture that you just showed me is hands that are cut and bloody and have chains on them, which is far more accurate.
Yeah.
And this is why I thank those hands.
Yeah, because a lot of work goes to coffee, and if
Yeah.
if you're a coffee drinker listening to this, appreciate the hands that bring that coffee to you from the farm right to even that barista making the coffee. But I'll tell
Yep.
you, even the producers have never been appreciated in the way that that espresso machine in that coffee shop
Right.
is
I'm like,
treated.
fuck your Nespresso. Say thank you to the hands.
Precisely.
All right, Ms. Vava. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Anytime you want to come back and talk about a thing, you know where to find me.
Cool. Thanks, Weeze.
All right, y'all. That has been this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Follow Vava. You'll have all the links in the show notes. And I'll catch you on the next one. All right, y'all. That's all I got. But don't forget your action items. 1, join me on Podia, where you can get access to tons of BTS content, including a very special Weeze interview with all of our guests. 2, rate, review, especially a written review. Subscribe, like, and share this podcast with all of your peoples. 3, if you aren't already, go peep me on IG. Follow me there. And, most importantly, keep coming back. All right, until next time, toodles!